Thank you for joining us again, and thank you for your participation so far. We've got an expert panel, very broad topic. We're going to look at where Europe can take the lead in the digital world, and the digital world is very broad these days. So it's a big topic. We're going to be flying through some subjects, but I'm hoping that we'll give you guys a chance to come in. And this is going to be a real exercise in prioritization. I'm going to ask our speakers to prioritize what they see as important, because we only have 45 minutes, so we can only go in on certain aspects of digitization. So a great expert panel. I'll just quickly say who they are, and then I'm going to ask them to make some opening remarks, frame our discussion, then we'll get into more of a back and forth conversation. So next to me, I've got Werner Steng. He's a cabinet expert, Executive Vice President Margrethe Vestager at the European Commission. Next to him is Francois Bertrand. He's the Vice President for Research and Innovation at Polytechnique Montreal. And next to him, we have Hilary Hanaho, who's the Secretary General of the Research Data Alliance. So we've got both a European perspective and a North American perspective and a global view. So hopefully we can put Europe in its rightful place, I guess. I'll tell you that any way you like. But anyway, let's start with Werner, and let's get him to just frame what he sees important over the next decade or so for Europe to take a lead in digital.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. My boss is in charge of making Europe fit for the digital age. So we started 3.5 years ago and asked ourselves precisely that question: what does that mean? And contrary to popular belief, that's not just about regulating, which we are very good at, but from the very outset, this was much more than that. It was much more than just regulation. It was making Europe fit for the digital age. That means being able to pull off all those wonderful things that the digital transformation can bring to us, right? That we have access to all these infrastructures, all the technologies, all the skills that are needed actually to implement any type of digital innovation. So from the outset, the objective was also a pro-innovation objective. It was a competitiveness objective. It was an objective to be more independent, more autonomous, more sovereign. I mean, there's lots of words floating around, but there was a geopolitical dimension from the outset, sort of the American system, the Chinese one, the European one. So to be a major player in this digital world, you also need to be able to do it yourself, or we wanted to be able. Second comment, that means it was not just, or is not just a digital strategy. If you look into our green strategy, you will find a lot of links to the digital one. We call it the twin transition. So, green tech, using technology, using data analytics, AI to make all sorts of processes in our economy and society more efficient. We need technology to become greener, because digital needs to become greener in itself as well. It's obvious. It's industrial policy, building on our industrial strengths, if you want, as a continent. About the data economy, a lot of our initiatives are around making data flow within Europe, making companies and researchers able to access and innovate on the back of data, have access to technologies like AI, have access to supercomputing where this is needed. So it's really a nice mix of industrial, digital, and green policies. And the legislative part is here, with my last comment, on the one hand, to ensure the trust that is needed for such technologies. We just have all these discussions about ChatGPT and this, that, and the other. Nobody knows anymore what is allowed, what is possible, what is ethical, and so on and so forth. So we need sort of the trust, we need the certainty for society, but also for innovators, for researchers, for companies. And we need our single market. And a lot of our digital policy, from AI to data platforms, is also here to create one single European market where there is a set of rules. If you comply with those rules, you can serve 450 million people.
Excellent intro. I'm going to actually ask you that a little bit more, if I may. Actually, been very fun. So I was just going to ask you to mention the digital decade as well, because I think that will help to frame the rest of our discussion. How much is the digital decade the framework for you guys?
You only gave me 3 minutes, so none of my mics seem to work properly. Anyway,
Digital decade is a manifest. It's our strategy put in numbers, if you want, right? And money behind it. Because 3.5 years ago, we said we want it all. You know, we want to have all those infrastructure skills and technologies and so on. Then came COVID, and with COVID came first an acceleration of digitization, and second, money. In all the national resilience programs, recovery and resilience programs, at least 20% had to be put on digital, 35% on green. A lot of that stuff is digital as well. So all of a sudden, we had also more money. So there was a drive actually to accelerate that, to have more money. So we set ourselves targets. So if you look into this digital decade, then by 2030, we want to achieve very ambitious targets in terms of infrastructures, all types of technological infrastructures, in terms of skills, in terms of business going digital, in terms of governments going digital. And attached to this digital decade, we have the Declaration of Digital Rights and Principles, which is a bit sort of the value side of it, that we're saying, well, but all of that digital transformation should serve people. And how are we going to measure that? Well, by respecting all the principles that we set out in this declaration.
Yeah. No, I think it's a very useful kind of overarching document. But thank you. Let's hand over to Francois and give us your perspective on what you'd like to see Europe doing.
Yeah, but first of all, if I may, I'd like to say a few words because I'm sort of an outsider here. I'm a Canadian, so I'd like to tell you a little bit about the institution I represent. So VP Research Innovation, something you already said, but Polytechnique Montreal is one of Canada's largest engineering, education, and research institution. And we're celebrating this year our 150th anniversary. So we're founded in 1873, which by, I guess, European standards, we're a pretty young organization, I think.
It's not bad.
It's not so bad. So, basically, we're the largest French-speaking campus in North America. This is what should be appreciated. We're talking about 10,000 students, but 10,000 students with 30% female students and more than 30% foreign students, and they come from all over the place. 130 different countries are represented. So we're cosmopolitan. So we're used as an institution to dealing with, I would say, organizations from other countries. And I think that this is something that I will probably emphasize and focus on later on when we talk about opportunities that are looming on the horizon when it comes to, for example, sharing data maybe, or things like that. So anyway, so very quickly, one thing I'd like to say here is, of course, our role is to educate engineers, of course, so that they can come up with, I guess, solutions. They can be key agents of change in a very fast evolving, I would say, world these days, as everybody knows here in this room. So we want to conduct research that will address those major societal issues I was referring to. And innovation is also very important. And for us to innovate, we have been actually participating for many years now in major we have been collaborating with a lot of major players in Europe and in Asia and the US and so on and so forth. Year in and year out, we signed 300 different contracts with companies from all over the place. So for us, if we just to sort of say a few words about what could be done in the future, I'd like to maybe relate to the geopolitical situation. For me, of course, it's very often viewed as a threat, but for me, I look at this as an opportunity. Right. And it's in our interest at Polytechnique, and I guess I would say it's in Canada's best interest to further develop our R&D activities in order to innovate, as I said, and help retain and increase our sovereignty in many different sectors. So we'll talk about AI, we might talk about quantum, we might talk about cybersecurity later on. So that's very important. So to sort of give a short answer to your question or the question of this panel, and once again, I said to myself, I won't answer this question directly. I'm from Canada. It's not up to me to tell you what to do, how to assume your leadership. But I think that in the face of this geopolitical situation, a collective leadership is needed here, okay? And it's very important, I think, for our institution, Polytechnique Montreal, for Quebec, for Canada, to team up I think that's the most important thing, to team up with like-minded countries, with countries and organizations that share similar values. I think that's very important. And this is what I meant by opportunity. And of course, we can talk about the Europe as an opportunity for collaboration, but also UK, the US, and also Asia. And
can I just ask you a very quick follow-up on that?
Yeah.
That's saying it's an opportunity. Are you actually seeing that happening already? Are you seeing greater cooperation with like-minded countries as a result of the geopolitical situation, or is this an aspiration?
And this is something that I knew you were going to ask me that question.
Right.
And I told you about, I can tell you about Polytechnique. So we've been working with other organizations in Europe for many years now. One of the company that we've been collaborating with is from Europe, okay, in the field of aerospace. And it's a long-standing collaboration. And this is something we've been doing for more than 20 years now. So it's part of our DNA to collaborate with Europe. But at the same time, David, I don't want to sound like I'm wearing rose-colored glasses here. And that the previous, I mean, earlier on when we talked about ECP, for example, in the other room, there are issues because the technologies are global, but the regulations are local. Yeah. So at the end of the day, what you need to do is to try to combine and make sure that all those technologies that will be developed so that they comply with a set of rules. And that's easier said than done, because if the countries don't agree with what should be done and how data should be, for example, shared between the different countries, it will be very difficult. If we know that in advance, ahead of time, then I think it will be possible for I guess, companies in Europe or in Canada to, I guess, develop technologies that comply with regulations by design, because they don't know. They know the rules already. But we have to know about those rules ahead of time as much as possible.
And you want to see the like-minded countries working together on that. Clearly.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll come back to some of that.
And Horizon Europe is one opportunity for Canada, as you guys probably know, and there are still ongoing negotiations between Canada and the European Commission. And every time I have the chance to talk with my Minister of Economy and Innovation, well, what he's telling me is that a decision should be, made anytime soon. So we'll see how this unfolds. Okay. But I think that once again, it's a wonderful opportunity that we might have as a group of countries.
Yeah, that's a clear, concrete, tangible thing. Yep. Okay. No, got it. Thank you, Francois. Hilary, let's get your opening remarks.
So I represent an organization called the Research Data Alliance, which has a significant number of years less to celebrate than your organization, but we're 10 years old this year. And for those of you, very briefly, the Research Data Alliance is the brainchild of governments and funders, particularly three: the European Commission, the National Science Foundation in the US, and the Australian government. And the concept was to create an organization where the people on the ground, the experts, the data experts and librarians, information managers, and all types of stakeholders could work together to find solutions for this digital data evolution, revolution, call it what you like, in a very concrete manner. And also to ensure that all of the solutions that are, if you like, made together are open and therefore available to the rest of the community. So it's sort of like foundational open science, though at the time when it was set up, open science was not in any of the papers that I look back on now. But and since we have over 13,500 experts and members from 148 countries. So I think that we can say we're particularly global. We have many more governments involved. Of course, it's hard for me to answer the question around European leadership with the hat of global. But what is one thing is very clear with the community that I represent, and of course I focus on its research data, and not only, but quite a lot of the work that's done in the Research Data Alliance is around research data, and now opening up more to research software, but as well. But what is true is that science has no geographical boundaries, and I fully support your sentiment that, of course, though there are local, regional, continental regulations that need to be adhered to. I suppose if I were to talk a little or to look where is Europe a leader? Europe's definitely a leader in the idea around the data spaces, the common data spaces. And something that we have a lot of work on ourselves in RDA. Why? Because people are looking to what has been done in the European Open Science Cloud, but also the common data spaces, taking it as an example and sharing examples. And I fully believe actually that the common data spaces, the open science clouds, the research data commons, they all have different words for them, but will be fundamental in helping as well to overcome some of these jurisdictional and geographical boundaries that we have, especially if they work, in a global and open manner around finding the nuts and bolts and the solutions. Clearly, our interoperability and standards will, for data as well, and data solutions are important. It's still, I think, quite a young field. The more that the digital technologies come, the more, complexities that there are, and they're just within the domains and the disciplines. And now we want, our mission or our vision statement says that researchers and innovators can openly share and reuse data across technologies, across disciplines and across countries to solve the grand challenges of society. So it's a rather big ambition, but that's what open science is fundamentally about. And so this, there are so many challenges in the health and medical sciences. We know it's a great example. It's one that the Secretary of State's talked about this morning as being a priority. Climate, of course, too. But then, the endless and boundless possibilities if the interoperability aspects were resolved. So to me, the interoperability and standards Europe has a light to shine, I think, there. And then I think the last thing I would say is, about the fact that, yes, leadership, it's important, sovereignty and everything, but it's also true that, Europe should be shining a light on what it's good at and learning from those that are less. And it's always been a big science diplomatic region, still continues to do so. So I believe that it's, in our sphere at least, less about the if you like, the competition around that, but focusing on the areas in which it's been heavily invested in, but that, other like-minded countries, as you said, could collaborate on.
Yeah, I think the like-minded countries could be the phrase of this session, actually, but let's talk a little bit about actually the implications of that. So Werner, I think a question for you potentially is, to what extent is Europe comfortable relying on like-minded countries for key R&D in digital? Do we, for example, need to worry about semiconductors if one of our friendly countries is doing that for us?
First of all, I'm the only one needing this micro because my battery is dead. That was the reason for my silence. I hope. Anyway, like-minded, it's also a big word for us, and a big concept. Of course, we started out sort of with the European vision, naturally, right? Our constituencies, our 450 million citizens, if you want, value-based digital technologies and so on. You start where your people are and where you have jurisdiction, and you can do it actually.
Yeah.
But at the same time, from early on, coming back to the geopolitics of it, we said, well, we must work together with the like-minded around the globe. And there's definitely, the US, there's Canada, there's Australia, there's Japan, there is South Korea, there's England, there's Great Britain, and many others with whom we have regular exchanges, of course. And more than that, and if I start with the US, which is the most prominent one, because we have this TTC going on for quite a while, the Tech and Trade Council. Of course, we discussed not only the principles and the value, but also practical ways of working together, from research to standardization to all sorts of things. And therefore, artificial intelligence is a good example, because we said, irrespective of whether or not we have laws in place, we all agree that there are challenges around AI, about certain use cases of AI, that we only focus on high-risk use cases and not the technology as such, that if there is a high-risk use case, how that risk could be mitigated. So we are discussing a lot around those concepts, so that at the end of the day, whether now Europe says there's a legal requirement to meet those standards, or in the US, they may be saying it's good practice or a voluntary standard or whatever, we would be doing the same things in the same way. also in interoperability terms, if you want. Yes, the more we can align in terms of standards, the more like-minded nations across the globe can do the same things, and the same would apply to Canada at some stage. I was having a conversation with the government just a few days ago, also working on AI, watching closely what we are doing, what the Americans are doing. So I think there is a growing community. Last comment on this, G7 just 10 days ago in Japan, they were also discussing AI and generative AI and so on. And they also agreed to jointly work towards solutions in a way, and mandated us and others in a way to look into ways into how we like-minded parts of the globe could be pulling this off.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about AI. I'm going to bring you in on this, Francois. So Europe's stuck its neck out to a certain extent and gone with this AI Act. It's a horizontal piece of legislation. It's basically pioneering, I think, globally. How do you view that in Canada? Do you feel the Brussels effect, as we like to call it?
I don't know if we're feeling the Brussels effect, but one thing I can tell you is that Europe is part of the Montreal AI hub right now, and that hub didn't exist 6 or 7 years ago.
Right.
So things have evolved. I mean, so fast in Montreal, and the Montreal AI hub right now was ranked #1 by Financial Times a couple of years ago in North America for the quality of its AI. So, and if you look at our industrial partners right now in Montreal, a lot of those industrial partners, they come from Europe already. And I could talk about the student mobility, okay, between Europe and Montreal, or Quebec or Canada, more generally speaking. A lot of European students are in Montreal right now as we speak. So mobility is also something very important, because I think that the fact, for example, that students between organizations, can travel back and forth, this help build trust, I think, between organizations, of course. And right now, after 5 or 6 years, I think AI has come of age up to a certain extent, and we've reached a point where what we need to do now is to industrialize AI, in various sectors, energy, resources, health, finance. So this must be done, but this must be done in a robust manner. I was talking about one of our industrial partners in Europe in the field of aerospace. So if you want to use AI on board an airplane, well, it has to be, we're talking about a critical system here. So it has to be robust, I think, that you don't have room to maneuver when it comes to those algorithms that are implemented, in those systems. But it has to be done also in a responsible manner. And this is where the regulations, come into play. And we have, of course, we could talk about the Data Act here in Europe. We could talk about the AI Act here in Europe. But we have a similar, we call them bills in Canada, I'm sorry. So we have the bill C-27 in Canada right now, which sort of encompasses, a similar type of Data Act and AI Act.
Is it consistent with the European legislation?
I'm not an expert in that field. The only thing I can tell you is that it sort of addresses the same similar issues.
Okay.
So I think that because data sharing will be something that with IoT, for example, will be ubiquitous. It already is, and will be more and more ubiquitous. Companies, once again, will have to abide by the rules, of course, prevailing in their countries. But at the same time, value chains are international. Value chains, are comprised of companies from many different countries.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, once again, things will have to be done in a coherent manner.
Yeah, sure.
Easier said than done, once again.
Yeah.
So, but discussions will be needed. So the discussion we had regarding SCP 1 hour ago, I'm not saying it's the same issue, but it's all about, sharing information among us. It was about using standards in the other room, but it's sharing information and doing it in a responsible manner, so that the citizen, of course, will be, I would say, well considered and in a decent manner. So, so this is what those regulations are all about. But if those regulations are too stringent, if control is, I guess, too rigid, will it kill innovation? I wouldn't say that, but it will certainly slow down innovation.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful. So there's a trade-off between doing nothing and trying to do things, that will be viewed as overkill.
You've got to keep an eye on what your big neighbor to the south is doing in that
Yeah.
respect. Yeah, yeah. No, got it. Let me just come to Hilary on AI as well, if I may, because obviously data's the raw, or one of the raw ingredients of AI. Do you, in the attempts of Europe to regulate data and AI, et cetera, and other regions as well, do you feel that's feasible given how fast things are moving? Because obviously we've got generative AI, for example, at the moment. You could argue that generative AI changes the way we should think of, partly about the data because it's drawing it from all sorts of different sources, but partly about how AI is being used. It's being used to create things rather than just to analyze things. So from your perspective, looking globally, should we be regulating at this point or is it too early?
Well, we came a good few years ago around, talking about creating value from data. Actually, it was Science Business helped us write the report. And one of the last recommendations we said was don't regulate what you don't yet know.
Right.
So there's, but I agree, again, there is a balance and a trade-off. And I don't think we were talking, we weren't really talking about AI at that time. We were talking about, things around data. And the speed with which AI is, accelerating and changing is complex. I still see massive challenges in the data sharing, the verification of data, the open science. So I think that I don't know if it's too late or not, but there definitely needs to be. The Data Act is a great place to start. We have a lot of work around the ethics of all of this in RDA with the data part.
Do your members worry about copyright with things like generative AI? Because obviously it's hoovering up data from around the internet.
I suppose I would say our members worry about data, but unfortunately, the statistics around data sharing aren't great, and the mindset. That's another problem, though. It's less. So remember, the 60% of our members are from research and academia. And therefore, in some way or another, they are supposed to be sharing the data that underlie the publications and things like this. The Commission itself has now this mandatory open science and research output policy. But the statistics around that are not great. And there are many reasons. It's not only the researchers' fault. Some of the infrastructures aren't in place. The systems and the tools to help them aren't there. But definitely the mindset needs changing, and it's a culture thing. And of course, for me in the future, which is slightly less maybe interesting, though the digital technologies to support this are important, is how this reform is going to take place, because we're talking about and investing in research, evaluation, reform, assessing the system, changing it to move away from the traditional if you like, route of publications and, journal impact factor, but we will require digital technologies and metrics and an awful lot of things to actually support that. So to go back to the question, our members are worried, I think, about improper use of data, the lack of citation and the lack of tools that can perhaps do that.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Werner, this is a kind of broader question, I think, that you must be grappling with the whole time, but you obviously, when things are moving as quickly as they are in AI, do you, and given the speed of the regulatory, the policy process, how do you kind of reconcile those two? What techniques do you use to kind of create a certain amount of future proofing?
It's difficult. It's not just the speed this time, it's also the magnitude of the impact or the possible impact, right? When we started out with AI, it was not so much even about ethics, because there are very few ethical questions that we're addressing in the AI. You could say, is it ethical or not if weapons are choosing autonomously their targets? That's not in the scope of the AI Act. We probably have a few things around social scoring in the Chinese ways that we don't like. You could say that's ethical. But the rest, it was more about legality, sort of things that are already illegal today, but which are very hard to pin down and to identify and to punish, would become more easily identifiable as a result of the transparency and accountability mechanisms, right? If there's discrimination going on of all sorts of kinds, if there's privacy violations, and all of that stuff has already been illegal in the past, but very difficult to find, right? Now, if you look into just the last few months, it becomes much more of a societal issue as well. I mean, if you take Yuval Harari, just a few days ago or yesterday, saying, well, it's changing the way our civilizations function, right? That you don't know anymore what the origin of content information is. Does it come from a human? Does it come from a machine? I mean, you come into very, very philosophical questions that go beyond mere technical issues, right? But to answer your question, we try to build in flexibility where we can, but there are limits to this. Yeah. If you take the Digital Services Act, and excuse me for this special, European angle here,
That's okay.
that was also about risk management in the
Yeah.
online environment,
Yeah.
right? And how
Yeah.
big platforms behave and how filter bubbles and disinformation work and manipulation on platforms and recommender systems and how they may be bad for young people and what have you. We did not pin down all individual risks and say how you have to mitigate each of those risks. We said, if you're very large, you're bound to have a more systemic impact. Therefore, you have to conduct a risk assessment. You have to take adequate risk mitigation measures, and we will only audit or have audited and then judge whether your risk mitigation measures are adequate. But that means this can be different risks tomorrow, but they still have an obligation to mitigate those. And so in that sense, you can a bit keep track of what is happening and stay flexible in your response.
And we're likely to see more of that style of regulation, probably, given how fast things are moving, I guess.
Yes, but there's always another, you also need legal certainty,
Right. Yeah.
predictability. And then you have the lawyers, I'm an economist, right? But then you have the legal service sort of saying, well, you cannot be so generic in your responses, companies need to know the rules and what they are. You also said, you spoke about predictability and so on, right? So you cannot just be too principles-based all the time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's also a lack of legal certainty.
Yeah. No, Francois, let's just get you to react sort of more broadly to the way Europe approaches this stuff, particularly cooperation with other countries. And from an R&D perspective in particular, do you feel that Europe is an attractive place to come and do R&D, or would you rather Europeans came to Canada and did it that way, as it were? I mean, in other words, do you feel you've got more freedom, I guess, in Canada than you would have in Europe? And how do your researchers feel about that?
I think my answer is the same. As a VP at Polytechnique, VP Research and Innovation, we have a long-standing history of collaboration between, once again, European organizations and Polytechnique in many different fields. I talk about aerospace, but I could tell you, I could give you examples in the medical and biomedical fields. Or sectors. I could give you examples, for example, in clean techs. So, I mean, in many different sectors, we are already collaborating with European organizations. And once again, the Horizon Europe is an opportunity for Canada, and I hope that everything will be finalized the way I expect.
Right.
And but I think that this will eventually pave the way to even more, I would say, opportunities for collaboration between Polytechnique or other, I would say, organizations in Canada and European organizations as well. I'd like to say maybe a few words about AI. We have in Montreal, IVADO, which is the Institut de Valorisation des Données. So it's our big data and AI institute. And this is where one of our top researchers, Joshua Benjo, he's the scientific director. And IVADO is in its 7th year right now, 6 or 7 years. So time flies. And we were able to secure a $500 million budget recently. So that's a lot of money. And in our program now, it's like a second phase. After 5 years, we decided, to come up with we decided to revisit our program. And of course, I talk about the fact that there was in many different areas of sectors insufficient robustness of current algorithms. So This is something that's very important, especially in uncertain settings, like those that you can, of course, that can occur, in aerospace. But also, I think that there's some kind of, I don't know if it's the appropriate word, but misalignment
Right.
between the deployment and adoption of AI and the ethical, social, cultural, legal factors.
Mm.
And I think that those should be viewed like in a holistic manner, because at the end of the day, they will actually frame the way things should be implemented with it when it comes to AI.
Right. Yeah.
And this is something that's very important in Quebec,
Mm.
not only in Montreal. And we have an institute called Obvia, which is actually not an institute, but an observatory on the social impacts of AI and numerics, more generally speaking.
Right. Yeah.
So we try to, of course, we're very concerned about how AI or Industry 4.0, more generally speaking, will impact the citizens.
Yeah.
And this is something that we're working on right now. And at Polytechnique, for example, lifelong learning is very important for reskilling and upscaling as citizens. So that want to do that want to go to, and we have, just to give you quickly an example, and we could say a few words about cybersecurity, because we've been talking about data sharing. And cybersecurity at Polytechnique Montreal, we have short duration programs, what we call certificates. Okay, that's this is part of our lingo at Polytechnique. We have right now, okay, 2,000 students
Right.
in
Yeah.
cybersecurity at Polytechnique Montreal.
Right. It's a growing field. Yeah.
Cybersecurity, cyber resilience, cyber defense, cyber resilience, cyber criminality, Internet of Things. And when I talk to those students, a lot of them, they have degrees already. I mean, they're just coming back to the campus because they need to reskill or upskill.
Yeah.
And they need some new, skills.
Yeah.
Because of course, cybersecurity is all over the place, and so is AI. So
Yeah.
so there you go. So for me, that is a concern. That at the end of the day, we'll need. We talked about brain drain a few years ago. Now it's more about talent shortage, I think, and we need to, I guess, pay attention to the fact that there are competent people and workers already. They just need to be reskilled or upskilled.
Yeah. No, I think the brain drain thing is and it's kind of been, it's one of these issues when you think about the geopolitical situation that people worry about periodically. But I want, because data sharing in this context, one of the potential, you mentioned it's maybe not happening to the extent you would like to see for various reasons. To what extent is that, one, down to skills that Francois just mentioned, scientists not having those skills, but two, down to regulatory uncertainty? I mean, Werner mentioned the importance of having clarity. Is regulatory uncertainty with things like the AI Act and other things going through, is that an issue?
Well, so I'll answer the second piece first. From the perspective of our individual members, remember, I represent a community of individuals. Yes, they work for. I don't think the regulatory aspect is problematic. They're very much looking at their local problem, or perhaps their scientific or disciplinary thing. Yes, the skills are definitely. So I'd be interested to know how many data scientists you have training, because the skills are problematic, and we need data scientists to support the researchers, because you can't expect there are some statistics, I'm sure they're not still okay, but they're probably as close as that in order for a researcher to actually structure and format their data in a way in which it would be, correctly shared for their discipline or their science, is 80% of their time. That means that they're spending only 20% on the actual research, and that's not okay. They should be being able to do the research and have the data scientists and the skilled people to support them. Now, actually, Europe, I think, is doing quite a lot in that particular field. We have, of course, the Netherlands who are quite advanced in that, in their universities and things. But skills shortage is definitely, not ideal. And remember that we are talking about also the Northern Hemisphere, with a couple of countries, which you've all mentioned, Japan and Australia, who are fortunate enough to have the resources perhaps to invest in this. But we need to share with some of these support mechanisms and things with other countries, so that it can in fact become truly global. and that these, regulatory things can be kept up, because it's not their researcher's job, but somebody needs to help them to ensure that they're not doing anything illegal or outside of the legal constraints of whatever their jurisdictional or institutional regulations may be.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a big topic. We're almost out of time actually, but I want to give the audience a chance to ask a question, but just a quick one for Werner, because this is really around the skill side of things, which I think is important for Europe if it's to fulfill its ambitions, which is from a broader perspective, do we have the expertise we need in things like, quantum computing, semiconductors, 6G, 5G, do we have that expertise in Europe to take a leadership role in these kind of key technologies, would you say?
No. I can elaborate. I mean, coming back to the digital decade, right? We have those 4 cardinal points, one being skills, and it's also the first one. And actually, we even renumbered them. We started with infrastructures, connectivity and data and AI and supercomputers and microprocessors. And then we said, no, skills come first, right?
Yeah.
We have also put numbers on that, sort of, we by 2030, we need another, I don't know how many million skilled IT skilled, but then we also said, hang on, that's not it. It's not only it. Of course, we need the IT specialists, right? And we set ourselves targets for this, the data scientists and the AI specialists and what have you. But then also for the rest of the economy, you need digital skills for any type of activity in any type of company, and every day more so. But also you mentioned AI and people, right? We need to have skilled people as consumers of social media. We need people that are able to consume online public services, which are also increasingly provided online. My mother is turning 80, living in the Austrian mountains somewhere without a computer, not wanting a computer.
No.
You're being increasingly cut off from everything out there, right?
Yeah.
So we said of course, we need all the specialists that we are lacking. We need skills across the board. We need it along we need really lifelong learning. When this has been a catchphrase for a long time, but in our recent strategy on digital skills, we also said we really need to connect the dots from kindergarten to primary education, secondary education, training and education and reskilling, upskilling in that dimension. And we also need it horizontally, that we not only train IT specialists and then a company or any sector needs to hire that specialist, but that you need digital skills across different economic activities.
Yeah.
So if it's not enough just to have a course, now a new course at a university on data scientists, but if someone studies agriculture, and the use of AI in the agricultural sector is bound to increase, and when do your crops best grow, and when should, there's lots of applications in fields that are not technical at all, up to cybersecurity, of course. In all of those sectors, will you have cybersecurity challenges? Yeah. So you need to mainstream those digital skills across all sectors of the economy.
Yeah, from a competitiveness point of view, that's the key to delivering the digital decade, ultimately, having that talent base. Let's just, we're almost over time. Any questions quickly from the audience? There's one here. You may have the microphone. Oh, no, there is another microphone.
No, nobody's getting my microphone.
Just hang on 1 second.
Thank you. Patrick McCutcheon. Can you hear?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can.
Patrick McCutcheon, Managing Director of IP Europe. I have perhaps a provocative question for Werner Steng. If I look at the title, where can Europe take the lead? I might rephrase that as, how can Europe take the lead if the European Commission proposes a regulation which reduces the incentives of European companies to invest in research and to contribute technology to open standard development? This, on its face, looks like it would help the technology sovereignty of perhaps Chinese companies.
Okay. Pretty direct question, so I'll let you take that.
At this time of the day, that's fine. We did ask ourselves the same questions, right? We do not think that there's always this dichotomy between sort of innovation and regulation. You either have one or you have the other. And I also explained that we do a lot of things in terms of building capabilities and investing in infrastructures and so on. So it's not just the AI regulation or the AI Act. We, by the way, at the same time when we published the AI Act, we also published an action plan of member states how to cooperate and build capacities and connect research centers and all the other things that are needed to build the center of excellence that we want to have at the same time. But I would really come back to this issue of legal certainty and predictability. When just on this ChatGPT thing, when from the US, those 100 signatories say we need a moratorium for this technology, which is totally unrealistic to start with. But I mean, what does that mean in terms of clarity or incentive for anybody to invest in this technology or use it? The same applies to the public sector as a customer, in this case of AI solutions. In Europe, we have a huge public sector, right? And there's huge potential in using AI to make all of our processes much more efficient. But if there is the shred of a doubt that it is legal or ethical or whatever to use that, any politicians will shy back from that. We had this in the Netherlands just a year ago, whenever that was, when they had used AI, to see whether social benefits had been unduly dispersed to some people. And then, of course, the AI got it wrong. And sort of, if you had a certain migration background and address and postcode and this, that, whatever, sort of the AI wrongly assumed that you had received your social benefits unrightfully. So, well, the government had to step down, Just imagine the next politician having to take a decision. Do we use AI, yes or no? So we do feel that as long as the legal framework is proportionate and clear, it will have a considerable pro-innovation effect.
Okay. No, thanks, Werner. Any final questions? We are over time. I'm just going to very quickly just get the views of each of the panel, and I just want you to say one thing you'd like to happen in the next decade. Just one thing in the digital sphere. It can be related to Europe, or it can be from a global perspective. I'll start with you, Hilary. What would be your one single thing you'd like to happen between now and 2030?
I would like to see the Uber of data. So the data spaces, European Open Science Clouds, work like Uber. The people come along, they need a service, it doesn't matter what the nuts and bolts are behind it for me. So yeah, interoperability of data across all different spheres.
And if that works in Europe, it would be a model for the world.
Absolutely.
Potentially. Okay.
Yeah.
Francois?
One word.
No, not one
One
word, just
thing.
one
No.
thing. One thing you'd like to see happen.
That's my one word.
Yeah.
And then a suggestion maybe for next time. Trust
Right.
between us. I think that's needed right
Okay.
now. And we talked about like-minded countries.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
trust is needed. And it takes time. So, but I think that we have a lot to lose by not working together efficiently. And I think that this should be considered in the negotiations between Canada,
Yeah.
Canadian, and the other countries, and not only Europe but also UK, the US for us, which is very important. Could talk about, of course, the IRA, but would need an extra hour. And one thing also that would have been interested in discussing is the advent of quantum.
Yeah.
Quantum is looming on the horizon, and it will be I think it will come up with disruptive technologies.
We've got to get a handle on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's more than one, but I'll take that. Werner?
And I'd like to build on what both of you said. Just in a way,
That's cheating.
there is this huge potential, and huge potential in making the best use of data for the environment, for health, for all sorts of purposes, right? That we will only be able to harvest if we have the trust that you're speaking about.
Yeah.
And for me, the trust then in turn, it really builds on transparency and accountability.
Yes.
Because as long as everything is happening somewhere in the dark and
Yeah.
people don't understand and don't know, and you're not going to have trust. So I would start
I
with
agree.
transparency and accountability.
Okay, perfect. All right, that's a good way to end a big picture session, I think. So thank you to you, the audience, for joining us. And if you could join me in thanking the panel for their insights and expertise.
Thank you. That's fine.
Now, just before we wrap, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, which, you know who they are, IP Europe and Business Finland and the Science Business Network for supporting today. I think we're going to have a drinks reception, I think, through just where we were before. So hopefully some of you or all of you can join us for that. You might have some follow-up questions for our speakers, etc. We just skimmed the surface of the ocean there, but thank you, guys.